All right, hey everyone. Happy Monday morning here, depending on where you're joining us, East Coast, West Coast. Great chat on the way. Greg Mescall here with you as part of our At Home with USA Water Polo series. And we're talking with former water polo player, but now many that follow NBA basketball know him as ESPN writer, host, podcaster, Zach Lowe. Zach, thanks for joining us.
How long can I hang on to former water polo player? If I haven't played competitively since I was like 19, is the statute of limitations infinite at this point?
Because of Masters water polo, it never ends. So you
Okay.
can always, because however old you get, you are now eligible for that Masters level of water polo. So 30s, 40s, 50s, we just say you're a former player and you're thinking about playing Masters.
Sure, I am. I think about it frequently. I think about a lot of things, but I'm sure.
Hey, for starters, because I think the diehard water polo folks know your water polo connection. The NBA fans obviously know what you do for ESPN and the NBA, but just kind of give us the background on your water polo experience. People certainly in the Northeast know your dad, Terry. Just tell us a bit about your water polo journey.
Yeah, my dad has been the coach of Greenwich High School water polo since its inception. Greenwich is one of the powerhouse programs on the East Coast. Uh, I mean, we win everything every year, basically. Recently, I don't know if we have, but a gazillion All-Americans, et cetera. So I started playing when I was a little kid at a swim club that my dad runs in the summers, and just fell in love with it. Played throughout high school, and I think made a kind of mistake not playing in college, but I quit before I got to college, or I chose not to play in college, but we had a very good high school team. And then I coached it, during college, and I coached a youth club during college and high school. So it's been a big part of my life. I still think it's the most fun I've ever had playing sports.
And now you've gotten deep into this NBA world. As you were kind of gravitating towards that, maybe you can kind of give us a little bit of a story of how you got to your current role. But did you immediately, as a kid when you're playing water polo, or as you've gotten into really the nuts and bolts of basketball, kind of see some of the similarities between the two sports that you like?
Yeah, I mean, I gravitate towards sports that are like, they reward people who can process information really fast and read and anticipate, a flowing mass of bodies, and anticipate patterns, pattern recognition, all that. So basketball has that, water polo has that, soccer has that. Soccer is a sport that I didn't really like growing up because I was a dumb American who was turned off by the lack of scoring, but it's the same pattern recognition. Hockey is the same thing. I gravitate towards sports that reward, and we've all met them, but there are a lot of great athletes, great swimmers, super strong people who can only get so far in water polo because their mind just doesn't track all the information flowing around. And basketball is the same way. And I like sports that reward both physical ability and cognitive recognition, kind of.
You have been at least tangentially involved in water polo due to your playing career, your dad's involvement for a long time. We were talking about this last week. We had, there's like a three musketeers of water polo at ESPN at one point, where it was you, Doug Kazarian, and Will Kane. I know Will's off to other things, but Doug talked about it a bit in our conversation a couple of weeks ago too, about the passion of water polo and people that played it, even if it was when you were 19, they still have this crazy love for it. It's been in your house for a long time. How do you kind of describe just like the fervent love for water polo, even if you've been out of it?
I think Doug and I actually played against each other in high school. We haven't reverse engineered the exact years that would have taken place, but we definitely played Exeter every year. Doug went to Exeter.
Yeah.
I just think it's one of those sports that's sort of like, I imagine it as something like handball in Europe, where it's not a mainstream sport, but you want to expose people to it because it's like, it's so objectively cool. Like, it looks cool. It sounds cool. It's in the broad strokes, like, it's putting a ball in a goal, which anybody can understand. Now, I think one of its weaknesses as a spectator sport for a mainstream audience is the rules are a little bit complicated and take some getting used to for regular people to understand. But I think we're passionate about it because we know the level of, first of all, the level of stamina, physical shape, the level of flat out violence that's going on, all of that stuff. I think we're all proud to have played it at any kind of level. And we wish people could watch it more, because when it gets its shine in the Olympics and stuff, people are like, I'm not sure I understand what every whistle means, but like when they give me the underwater shots, that's awesome. Like, these dudes are skipping the ball off the water at like 60 miles an hour. That's badass. Like it's objectively a cool sport.
Yeah, I think everyone, and we talked about this with Doug as well and others, and other people in the media that I've met over the years, that even if they have no knowledge of it, they get that one game experience, and everyone agrees that it is something that they really like. To that end, and we're kind of talking about people that have a history with water polo, and I'm sure you've seen it on social media, right? When you even like a tweet that has something to do with water polo, people get so excited in the water polo community that someone who has a background in the sport is doing something else that they also enjoy. It's the same thing happens with Doug and others. There's like this word of mouth thing going around, right? So people will say all the time casually to me, hey, Zach Lowe does NBA, but did you know water polo was his first thing?
That's awesome.
Why is there that crazy love, like someone from the water polo community made it onto something else?
Because we feel like it's a small, close-knit community, right? And we wish it were bigger, but those who live within it are very passionate about it and remain passionate about it throughout our lives. And like to your point, I mean, one of my dreams, I don't know if I'll ever be able to execute it, but I want to go to the Olympics, and I don't really want to cover basketball. I mean, I'll cover basketball because that will get me there, but I want to go, and if ESPN will let me use their platform to cover water polo, I want to go and cover water polo because I want to tell people, hey, here's this awesome sport. Let me explain it to you. I might be a writer now for some reason, or a podcast host Let me explain it to you in terms that may be easier to understand than just watching a game, or can prime you to watch a game. And B, like water polo players are great storytellers. Mm-hmm. They don't have the same kind of filter, or a filter, like lack of, they have no filter, right? They don't have the same filter or media training or caution that mainstream sports stars have. So you go to the Croatian water polo team or the Hungarian water polo team, the stories you're going to get are amazing. Like the work does itself. You just put a tape recorder in front of them and say, hey, what are you about? And like all of a sudden the content would be great. And if I could get it onto a mainstream platform, I would be really proud of that.
When you daydream about covering the Olympics and the type of stories you tell, in addition to the ones that you don't even know, I know that often with basketball, you'll get into the nuts and bolts of a game, right? You'll post something like, just watched 3/4 of Pelicans Raptors, and here's what I saw. When you think about getting a chance to watch 2 weeks of the best water polo, is there like a tactical technique side of it that you'd like to explain too?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first avenue in is you got to start human interest, right? So you got to find the guys that have just crazy stories and are willing to tell them to you, because that's the hook for people who aren't necessarily going to be primed to read the tactical stuff. But, it's not like I watch water polo much anymore. I wish I had more time to watch it. But when I do, particularly at the highest level, what's interesting to me is just how essential, even more so than I recalled it being, man ups are, power plays are. And like, so why is that? Is that to the detriment of the sport a little bit? Like, are power plays too important, or too many goals coming from those situations? What makes a good power play? Who are the best power play players? How essential is it to have 2 or even 3 lefties on a power play? Like, well, I think that, kind of analogizing it to hockey would be an interesting tactical way in for fans.
Yeah, we have to give a shout out. Associated Press reporter Jay Cohen out of Chicago. He played club water polo at Ohio University and covered the games in Rio, and spoke about a lot of the same stuff, right? Like trying to get into that like under the hood mentality of people that maybe don't know some of the basics and why it's interesting. We're talking with Zach Lowe here, ESPN NBA writer, host, reporter, podcaster. If you have any questions, if you're watching live on Facebook now, feel free to leave them in the chat, and we'll try and pass them along here to Zach. You mentioned covering the Olympics, and the NBA is about to restart. I couldn't help but think about some similarities between the NBA bubble and the Olympic Games. Of course, the NBA bubble is going to run a bit longer than an Olympics, but for those that have an Olympics experience that are playing in the NBA, I wonder if they can draw any of those similarities where it's the same venue, you're all stuck together, there's no home court or home pool advantage at an Olympics unless you happen to be in your home country, right? Any similarities there that you've noticed, any sort of benefit to those that maybe have gone through it with Team USA?
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because, I spent a lot of the weekend on the phone with people who are there. I'm not in Orlando. I don't know if I'll go to Orlando, but I'm obviously very curious about like the nuts and bolts of how it's working. And among the players who I talked to were a few international players who have played for their national teams in the Olympics and in tournaments a tier below the Olympics, or growing up in under 16, under 18, whatever. And they're like, I'm looking around my hotel room and like, yeah, it's not the Four Seasons in Midtown Manhattan, but like I had one guy tell me I've had this same room, literally the same room almost, except I had a roommate on my national team. And like we were taking vans and buses like to podunk little arenas, like, and I thought that experience was kind of cool because it was a good bonding experience. So for me, like for this guy, it was like, this is no big deal. Like, yeah, I know it's not the Four Seasons, but obviously Team USA, the accommodations have been a little bit different at the Olympics in recent years. So I'm not sure how comparable it is for them, but I have heard that.
Yeah, whether it's a cruise ship or wherever they might be staying. But you're right. I think a lot of Olympic athletes, whether it's water polo or other sports, if you've been training at the Colorado Springs Training Center, you're thinking same venue, 3 months. What's the big difference, right? We're going to have the same food, all of that stuff. But I know it's an adjustment for those players. It's going to be interesting to kind of watch from that. You often tell stories that are, as you mentioned, kind of a little bit of the nuts and bolts, and then of course like the feature side of it. What's most intriguing outside of the mechanics of the bubble that you're interested in kind of talking about over the next 2 months, 3 months as you follow this NBA restart?
I mean, the mechanics are the most interesting. Like I find myself asking the dumbest questions all of a sudden. Like, so do you get a knock on your door and then food appears? How long is the walk from like your room to your meeting room? Like, what are the Disney staffers wearing? All that. But I am interested in, I think if the NBA gets past the first round, then the light's at the end of the tunnel. Then there are 8 teams left. All of them are really good. All of them can talk themselves into, at the very least, we're a break away from being in the finals. Some are better than that. Some are favorites to be in the finals. If there's something to worry about, it's the teams that really don't have a lot to play for in the lead up to the first round. That's to me are all of those players going to feel motivated to continue to give everything, to obey all the logistical rules and all of that. But I think I'm interested in like how the next 6 weeks unfolds, because I think if you get by that first round, I think they have a chance to pull it off.
You've heard a lot of talk about, well, all of these basketball players have not been able to play at a high level. There's going to be a lot of these soft tissue injuries. There's going to be things that they can't foresee because they haven't been able to play a lot of games. In the aquatics world, swimmers, water polo players might look at that a bit as a taper, right? They got a chance to kind of ease up on their training and now go full bore. Maybe that benefits an older team, players that have some more veterans. As you think about it in your two worlds, basketball and then aquatics, a benefit to having some time off and then ramping back up, or is it more hard, like a water polo player is maybe out of shape, to try and get back in the mix and go hard?
I think this is like no one knows what the hell is going to happen, because this is 4 months of not being with your team, or for the most part. Some of it lived in isolation. Much of it for some of these guys lived in isolation. So to me, the obvious teams that benefit are like the teams that, A, if you stayed in shape, and B, if you have players like Kawhi Leonard, who is on a load management program to begin with, and you have to be careful with him that he ramps up appropriately for the playoffs. So now he's had a lot of time to rest. Players who were injured before have gotten healthy, but I default to the assumption that when things are unfamiliar, and nothing is more unfamiliar than what's going on in Orlando, I just think the veteran teams, everyone's obsessed. A lot of people think younger teams, younger legs. They look at a team like Boston, and I guess I can believe that. Like, we'll see what kind of shape they come back in, but I just feel like this is going to be unnerving and weird. And when things are unnerving and weird, if I've got some dudes who have been there before in unnerving situations, I feel comfortable. I feel more comfortable with that.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting to watch. I know all of us that are fans of both, and especially NBA fans are dying to check it out. I wanted to get into a little bit more about kind of the mechanics. The title of this conversation, right? Kind of the connection between water polo and basketball. So probably a couple of months ago, and maybe it's happened twice, there's been a highlight from Nikola Jokic on the Denver Nuggets where he kind of takes a rebound and he turns and he fires what we would call an outlet pass beautifully, right? And it's kind of catches a guy in stride. But water polo fans say, now that was a water polo pass. What else about the game is so linked, the two, right? I mean, obviously a pass like that comes to mind, but if you're thinking about screens, picks, outside shooters, centers, people defending the center spot, when you think about the two, what are some of the real basics that compare closely between water polo and basketball?
Well, what you just said, it's less so now that the game has moved outward, but the primacy of a low post player and a hole man, right? Like everything, and the way that space is defined around a goal or a basket, and the importance of proper spacing and proper separation of bodies and all of that. And so those kind of patterns, those patterns and that spacing and stuff like that. And yeah, picks, much more prevalent obviously in basketball than water polo, but you see them in water polo. And counterattacking, fast breaking, the importance of transition defense and transition offense and turnovers and all of that stuff really does cross over. Obviously, there are huge differences. But yeah, Jokic is I once asked Jokic about water polo because he's from Serbia. And you just sort of assume when you see somebody doing stuff with one hand like that, and they're from anywhere in the former Yugoslavia, they played. And I can't remember exactly what he told me, but I think it was something like, I kind of played. Like I just screwed around a little bit because I had some friends who did, but I don't think he actually ever played on a serious level. But I guess it's like there, it's kind of like basketball here. Like people just play it. It's like people play it in the sea. It's my favorite thing about going to Croatia.
Well, and that's the big difference. That's always the hurdle in some areas of the U.S. You talk to someone like Jokic, the first part of your conversation isn't explaining what it is, right? So right. Even if he has never done it, he's of course like, oh yeah, this is like kiddie kick soccer or t-ball or whatever else that all the other kids played in Serbia or Croatia or Montenegro. That was kind of my next question. As you've talked to international guys, I know you have family ties to that area as well, but do people have a knowledge of water polo? I mean, I know it's probably a weird question to weave into an interview with, LeBron or someone else, but it's like, does it get a chance to come up often, and what's people's general knowledge or reception to it?
It doesn't come up often.
Yeah.
I almost never talk about it with NBA people. I don't recall ever asking about it other than Jokic and some like Bogdanovic I've asked about it. The Croatian Bogdanovic I've asked about it. And he played, but just again, similar, like, all my friends jumped in the water, we would play. But I don't recall talking about it much with NBA people. And when I do, both in the NBA and casual regular life, you might not be surprised to know that violence is the first thing that comes up. Like, what's really happening under there? What can the refs see? What's the worst thing you ever did to somebody else? What's the worst thing somebody ever did to you? What's unforgivable? Like, what's going on down there? People want to know that.
Yeah, in the water polo world, we like to say that the water is very forgiving, and that it's not as, because it's tough, right? This is this debate we have all the time. I think as you want people to try water polo, but those that played it, even yourself, right? You're talking about, well, there's this badge of honor. It's a thing that not everyone can maybe do, right? You can't just recruit someone off the couch to play water polo. Like, we can go to the park and shoot some baskets, but the average person probably can't just jump in and play. But you want people to know about it and try it, but it also might be the hardest thing you ever did in your life.
Yeah. And well, first of all, there's just a baseline like level of swimming ability you need to have. Like, you just can't be someone who's comfortable going to the beach, right? I mean, you got to swim up and down a pool and like have people dragging you and all that stuff. So there is a certain, the barrier to entry is higher, I think, than a lot of sports, but it's going to be really hard. And yeah, like I really, almost for that reason, I really, much more so than a lot of my teammates, I really resented dirty players. I didn't think it was a badge of honor to play dirty. And we could define like what the line is between playing physical and playing dirty. But like some things, are just dirty. And I really resented those guys. Not like I wasn't afraid to play against them or anything, but I just thought like why? Like, the game's already physical enough. Like there's a certain kind of honor code, and like to throw – so like to try and introduce that sport to kids or whatever, like players like that are a detriment to it.
Just looking at some of our Facebook comments here. So we have our entire men's national team is joining us right now, just watching. So
holy smokes.
Olympian Alex Obert, who played basketball back in the day as well in high school, he wanted to know, how do we get slow basketball players into water polo?
Slow basketball players?
Yeah, so guys who aren't that fast on land, but maybe they can do the job in the water.
That's an interesting question. Can we we got to start young, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
got to start young. You have to realize you're too slow for basketball at a young age. And well, part of it is like where you're from, right? Like if you're just not, if in the US, if you're not from California and like 7 other localities, it's just not even going to be in your wheelhouse of things to think about.
Yeah, that's for the national governing body, that's one of the big challenges to try and grow the game, right? To get it to that point where it's at least known, right? So people aren't having to fight the explanation of what is this thing, why should I care about it, and then kind of go from there. We'll see if we get any other questions coming in here. I was always curious to kind of, as someone who is well versed in the NBA, but also knows the sport of water polo, if you could kind of assemble like a dream team of water polo NBA guys. So you would take guys that are in the NBA and put them in water polo.
Ooh.
And now the obvious route might be to go like, well, guys from Serbia and Croatia and Montenegro, there's quite a few of those guys in the NBA. They'd at least know what we're talking about. But then I come back to like, well, let's just take the pure athletes and try and teach them water polo. Is there anyone outside of maybe Jokic or, you mentioned Bogdanovic or Marinovic is just gigantic, right? That might be good to transition into water polo?
Well, can I assume, all right, for the purposes of this thought exercise, can I assume that we can just get everyone to like swim fast? Like I can assume
correct.
basic swimming ability. Okay.
Yep.
So the first name that popped into my head is lefty monster hole man potential, Zion Williamson. Let me start with Zion Williamson. And like aside from like LeBron and Giannis and all those guys, like you get, and then you have to have some spunky fire hydrant guys who really think at a high level and maybe aren't dirty, but maybe aren't afraid to tread the line a little bit. So like someone like Kyle Lowry, a fire hydrant 6'1" guy who reads the game really well, somebody like that. But Zion was the first name that I thought of. Ben Simmons, maybe somebody like that. But Zion, I mean, can you imagine if Zion learned how to play hole man? It would be such a problem.
I mean, you just rarely get a good lefty center to begin with. And then to have someone who's just like nothing but muscle down there working against the defense would be impressive.
And by the way, and Zion's a great passer. Like Zion, I didn't watch much Duke, hardly any college basketball, so I didn't know that until the first game I saw him play. I was like, yeah, the dunking, all that I knew, but like this dude can pass. Like he sees the game really well.
Well, when you mentioned kind of a scrappy guard, I was just picturing like Patrick Beverley, like pressing, all the way, like just a full 30 meters and just harassing the offensive player and making it very, very difficult to even set up an offense.
That's a good one. And Patrick Beverley is going to take some liberties with the rule book too. So like he's going to be, as he is in basketball, one of the ultimate, you love him if he's on your team and you hate him if he's on the other team guys.
No, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. And then of course there's no shortage of guys that, I was just kind of Googling before we talked, right? As far as guys that are from the former Yugoslavia that would at least have maybe some of that water polo background, Jokic, Bogdanovic, Vucevic from Montenegro. And then I also looked up, and you may know this, Chris Humphries, now I don't believe he's no longer in the NBA. Once beat Michael Phelps in a swim race, he could have been the next big water polo player.
That's a good one. Yeah, the easiest one is to go Yugos, ex-Yugos, but I feel like we could get more creative like that. So Zion is a good starting point for my NBA. So I feel like Marc Gasol, as like Spain, good. Like he definitely knows what water polo is. Sure. Big, smart, great passer. I feel like I might want him on my team too.
Yeah. Now you've had the chance to visit that area. Croatia, Montenegro, former Yugoslavia, I should say. How do you describe the love for water polo there? Just from what you've seen, in going to Budapest in that area as well, I was blown away to see water polo was on in sports bars. In the athletic stores, there was water polo balls in the window. It wasn't a basketball or a soccer ball. They were just crazy for the sport. For someone who grew up playing it and loves the sport, is that like the dream to go over there and see? This is such a place that appreciates this game.
Let me tell you about what is probably literally my happiest place on earth. The place I feel like when I'm there, I feel this is where I'm meant to be, and I could honestly pick up my whole life and be here. So in Croatia, there's something called the Divja Liga, which translates to Wild League, which is all of the local clubs around Dubrovnik and like within a 2-hour radius of that play a tournament in the sea. And a lot of the tournament is hosted in this harbor that is right outside the city walls of Dubrovnik, which for people who don't know is where Game of Thrones was filmed, the King's Landing. It's like the most idyllic, beautiful setting with an island in the background, the castle looking thing, and on the other side. And there's like bleachers where stone bleachers where people can watch. And so the local clubs play each other, and fans come, and fans are in boats, like all around. The referee's in a boat, and there's foghorns. My daughter doesn't like it because people are like lighting off fireworks and smoke bombs and stuff like that in the colors of their club. I, of course, love it. And right behind the bleachers is a basketball hoop where kids and adults are always shooting around, playing basketball, just 2-on-2, 3-on-3 while the water polo game is going on. There's a ping pong table, I think. People are sometimes kicking soccer balls against the castle walls there. And it's just like, people are so into it. All the clubs come to watch the rival clubs play. It's I could spend 6 hours there, and like it's the best. And like you go to any little coastal town in Croatia, 50-50 chance you're going to go to the beach and there's going to be a water polo goal or a lane lines set up, and it's just like you just feel like this is where I'm meant to be.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard, I've never been. I definitely want to go. I've heard many athletes talk about that have played over there professionally, or they visited for tournaments, describe that exact scene and how it's amazing. And I wonder if that's, one of the things that has limited water polo's growth in the U.S. is just that kind of easy access to it, right? You talk about you just stroll up to the beach and there's a goal right there. That's not something that's happening even in places in California. As much as they love water polo, once in a while you'll see it. There's a beach tournament, but it's not as if there's just goals stationed in the water all around.
Not only that, but people like just in Dubrovnik, where my wife is from, people go into the sea with their friends and throw a ball around. No goal, just like, let's get 3 or 4 guys together and have a pass for an hour. And I sometimes when I see that, I'll dive in the water and I'll speak my little rudimentary Croatian, and they're so impressed that an American can speak any Croatian at all, and B, that this American who speaks Croatian knows how to throw a water polo ball around with them. They're like, they think I'm the coolest person in the world. And you just dive in and start playing.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. We're talking with Zach Lowe here. Just a couple of more questions as we're looking through the Facebook Live here. Lots of love for you, Zach, here on the Facebook Live. So appreciate everyone tuning in. Ben Stevenson, also on the men's national team, suggested that Joel Embiid would be a great center.
He was on my list.
And he has kind of, I think, the right frame of mind, kind of chill, relax, would not get ruffled by, maybe some of the activities that go on inside 2 meters.
Oh, no. Joel would love that. And yeah. Joel is the closest thing in the NBA now to Shaq. Yeah. And so I get that. It's just that we would have to get past the hurdle everyone has with Joel about conditioning and, so we'll see. But Joel was on my list.
As we get to kind of winding this down, when you think about water polo and you talk about it with some of your colleagues or other people, what else do you want people to know about it? When you think about the reasons why you love it and why it's still something you think about playing one day, what else comes to mind about why it's such an important sport in your life?
I mean, just the same thing that almost every team sport has, the camaraderie of it, and just that it always ranks. So, any pool, you sort of fight all of it, like, is this an elitist sport, right? Because the barrier to entry, you have to live near a pool and all that. But below that is like, and that's an issue, I think. But below that is like, this is a tough person sport. Like, this is as nitty gritty a sport as exists in the world, and you have to play it at a high level. You have to be in physical shape that you just don't even believe is possible. And B, you got to be tough as all hell, because people are going to be hitting you in places you don't want to be hit all the time. And just also that it's just like, it's not that hard to understand. I like the whistles and the fouls, and like fouls being good, but in most sports fouls are bad. And like you just got to get past that. And just like you sometimes you don't even need to know what's going on. You don't just let it wash over you instead of being bogged down by the particulars. Watch the goalies. How badass are the goalies? Like that's a goalie in the water. That's pretty badass. We don't have that in any sport. Like in most American sports have no goalies at all. See how high they get out of the water. Go try and score. Imagine trying to score on the U.S. men's national team goalie You got 100 chances and you're just an average dude. No defense at all, 4 meters out. Give it your best shot.
Yeah. It's probably not going to work out for you. That's for sure. But you're so right. That is one of the huge stumbling blocks when explaining water polo. That fouls are a good thing goes inherently against what we've been taught about any other sport. Foul, press, right? Foul, slow down the counterattack. That's going to be beneficial to you. In anywhere else, right? You're penalized for that.
Well, and also like what confuses people too is like, well, okay, but you can't shoot after a foul, but sometimes you can shoot after a foul because that guy just shot after a foul. So why was he able to do that? Like, I don't like, okay, just like, look, we'll get there. We'll get like football's also complicated. Like,
yeah.
Like try to explain like 1st and 10 to someone who doesn't know what football is and see how long you have to go until they get what a down is and distance. Like you can do it if you just, put your mind to it a little bit.
Yeah. One other point you hit on earlier, and something we're going to get into in the next couple of weeks. Obviously, there's been a lot going on as it relates to like social justice reform and that sort of thing. We have kind of a task force getting started soon to address things like access to pools, right? Because you brought up an interesting thing. Like that's something that I think a lot of places that don't have water polo, but also don't have aquatics. One of the big stumbling blocks is just being able to be able to use a pool, right? And you came up in an area, right? They have great aquatic facilities, but there are lots of areas where that's not even on the table to be able to get into a pool to then even swim, let alone learn water polo.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, a lot of sports face that, right? Tennis is kind of like that to some degree. There's hockey's very much like that, like ice rink access. It's sort of just built into the sport, and But then again, water is everywhere, right? Coasts are everywhere, lakes are everywhere. Like it's but it is an issue.
One other question we just got from the Facebook Live here. When interviewing covering the top level NBA players, the elite all-star guys, what are the main, and this comes from our national team mental skills coach, so it's kind of a mental skills bent on it. But when you're interviewing those top level guys, what are the main mental characteristics you think set them apart from, say, the average player?
I mean, for the most part, an acceptance of failure that is just sort of deep rooted in their soul, and they don't come into the league with that. I think they have to experience it and experience the backlash that comes with being the guy who gets blamed, and just living through it and being like, oh, actually, it's okay. Like I survived that. I'm going to fail, and it's on me. If our team doesn't win, I get that, and I'm okay with that. And just an ability to sort of like, I mean, it sounds cliche, but in the biggest moments, in the biggest games, to just sort of recognize the importance of it, but also trick yourself into like, it's still just a normal game. It's still basketball. It's still the game I know how to play, and just tune out all of the noise. But it's more like, I mean, Michael Jordan has talked about this a lot. Obviously, he was back in the news all summer because of The Last Dance, but just sort of like, look at the number of big shots that I missed. And like you just got to be okay with that. And some players are afraid of those things, and the star players realize at some point they can't be because you can't be a star and be afraid of those things.
And then another question regarding numbers, right? And you talked about this a little bit earlier, but when it comes to water polo, people are obsessed with how do we do 6-on-5, 5-on-6? I think that's the question everyone asks after a game. A lot of other pro sports are trending towards like a very analytic-based model, especially baseball by and large. But as you think about the two, basketball, water polo, how important are the stats? Is that something that you're heavily invested in and like pouring through all of this data to kind of understand what's happening, or is it more of a I see what I see and kind of the feel of the players on the court, or in our case in the pool?
You got to do both, and there's no way to do it anymore probably in any sport without doing both. But I think 10 years ago, as the analytics revolution was really happening, people underestimated the degree to which you have to filter all of the numbers through a pretty sophisticated understanding of what's actually happening in the pool or on the floor. So if you don't understand that stuff at a very high level, you're not going to really understand what the numbers are telling you, why they're telling you that, whether they're just a fluke, why they might be a fluke. You're not going to understand the 7 questions you've got to ask underneath the numbers as you dig in if you don't understand what's going on in the pool. And if you do, you'll understand all that stuff, and you'll understand how to interrogate the numbers and whether they're going to be faulty or, all that stuff. But they interact so closely and more so than people thought 10 years ago.
Zach, this has been awesome. One final bonus question for you. People can't see it here, but you are wearing an Action Park T-shirt. So as a fellow Northeasterner, I broke this out. One of my all-time favorites right here. Give me the scouting report. If this man were to be a water polo player, what does he bring to the pool, Patrick Ewing?
I think he's clearly a whole man. He probably plays one on man up, maybe two, because you can just throw the ball to him and he'll tip it in. But defensively, maybe he's solid, but he's just never going to be the best guy. But he's going to be a star. There's no question. Patrick Ewing's going to be a star. I feel bad that I just hope you, as a Knicks fan, I keep telling my Knicks fans friends, it's going to happen. Like, at one point, a star is going to go there, or you're going to get lucky in the draft. They're not going to be bad forever. It's going to happen. But Action Park is my other happiest place on earth. Divya Liga, and if anyone listening to this, if you go to Dubrovnik and you are a water polo fan, I mean this with all sincerity, find out when Divya Liga is and plan your trip around that, because I could never imagine feeling so at home in what is a foreign country to me as I do standing there for 3 hours watching that.
And you have to go to Divya Liga because Action Park has long been closed due to multiple lawsuits, right? So
no, it's open again. Well, I don't know what its status is. It opened as Mountain Creek. Okay. They ditched the Action Park name. Then they closed again. I believe they're reopened now. But Divya Liga might be more dangerous than Action Park.
At least today, right? The original Action Park, and I think there's a documentary out on it, had things that defied gravity and probably every safety measure, but maybe the current version is a little.
By the way, do you know who I saw at Divya Liga? I didn't actually see him at Divya Liga, but I saw him in Dubrovnik the last time I was there last summer. I landed in this is a small world and whatever. I landed in the Dubrovnik airport, bleary-eyed after a layover in Vienna with my family. And I'm sitting there at baggage claim, and I see someone holding a bag that has a water polo ball and some logo on it. And then that person turns around, and he's got a hat and sunglasses, so I can't get a good look at his face. The bag says Acevedo. And I went up to him. I said, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Are you Tony Acevedo? And now we're email buddies, and he was there to do camps around Croatia, and he went to watch Divya Liga. That was I was starstruck in a way that I don't get starstruck around LeBron, but when I saw Tony Acevedo in an airport, I was like, sir, I'm really sorry to interrupt you. I'm so sorry to bother you, but are you the Tony Acevedo?
and he's a big deal. He played for Juk Dubrovnik years back.
VKU. That's right.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. So that, I think, Zach, you probably made a lot of water polo people's day right there. You got no problem rolling up to LeBron James or Zion for an interview, but you see Tony Acevedo in the airport and you're like, can someone go get his autograph for me?
Well, first of all, it's an airport. He's with his family. He's probably tired too, but I just sir, I'm really sorry. I got very meek and he couldn't have been nicer. And yeah.
How do we get you back in the pool? Are you going to come out to Masters one of these years and play?
Well, I just moved to the suburbs a week ago. And my pool, New York, I lived in New York for 17 years. To get pool time in New York is tough. Yeah. It requires a lot of subway, a lot of scheduling, a lot of just stuff that my life no longer had room for. So I played at Asphalt Green for probably about a solid 6 months. Now 10 years ago, I would go every Saturday or Sunday and play in an adult league. And I thought I was in good shape and learned very quickly that I was no longer in good shape. But I loved it. I loved getting back. I had the frustration of my mind knows what to do, but my body can't quite do it anymore. That frustration that all old athletes feel. And then I kind of lost touch with that. But now that I'm in the birds, it's on the table for me to get back into it. I would love to. It's the best sport.
I think we need an all media water polo alumni team to do Masters, 30s or 40s plus, whatever it might be. And then you guys all write stories about it. It'd be a win-win for everybody. Just
as long as the EMTs are on hand.
Yeah, we'll have everyone standing by to make the rescue.
That's right.
Zach, this was awesome. Thanks so much. I know you're back to probably reporting on everything, all things bubble related. So good luck with that. And if you have to head down there, stay well and safe and healthy and everything.
My pleasure. Anything I can do for USA Water Polo, always, always, always. It's the best sport. I miss it so much. And I really do hope that whenever the Olympics have, at some point, I'm going to go to the Olympics. I'm going to force my way there, and I'm going to try my best to tell water polo stories.
Let's start it now. Get Zach Lowe to Tokyo or Paris or LA. We'll take him at any of these future Olympic games. That'd be awesome. Thanks, man.
My pleasure.